Okay. Let me quickly run you through the NUS response and then wrap up. Okay? Okay. The NUS response then is that this is just a brief slide on the NUS history, how we got to the National University of Singapore in 1980, and this year celebrating 110th anniversary in conjunction with Singapore's 50th year of independence. Here, institutional challenges very common with any big institution of 37,000 students. How do we continue to engage them actively? Well, tomorrow's world, where the smart age, smart nation also call for a smart university, what do we do about that? To be sure, NUS has been laying foundations for technology-enhanced education for the last 20 years. We started with a global campus initiative back in mid-1990s, which gave us our in-house learning management system called the virtual learning environment. Today, we have at least 90% of our courses on our learning management system. So online teaching and learning is not new to us. This campus initiative was an initiative that gave birth to the Center for Instructional Technology, now a very critical center in helping us to deliver blended learning and MOOCs, and the CDTL, our Teaching and Learning Center, very much a pedagogical unit advising us on online learning and MOOCs. Some of the highlights of the in-house learning management system and the development of our instructional technological units, including the latest initiative, which is running high-stakes e-exam fully online. This biology course has up to 700 to 1,000 students each time it's offered. So we've run 2 trials of e-exams using this particular course in the last year. E-Learning Week has been around with us for 6 years now. This year, we will be having e-Learning Week in about a week or 2 weeks' time. The entire campus, with few exceptions, go e-learning for the entire week for all activities. These are some of the formats used for e-learning. It's not so much the usage level, it's the fact that prior to e-learning, many of us only worked on webcasting our lectures. But with e-learning in the past 6 years, you see increased production of e-books, the use of video conferencing, the use of WebEx, Google Hangouts, and so forth. So we are now building on earlier work laid down by our campus initiative, including our LIFT initiative, LIFT for Learning Innovation Fund, where our president devoted $10 million for technological experimentation. So far in the last 2 years, we have funded 26 projects across 17 departments purely on technological experimentation. We signed up with Coursera in 2013, and we've launched 3 MOOCs in the first round, the Music MOOC, the Quantum Mechanics MOOC, and the Philosophy MOOC, commanding 109,000 learners online. We're doing a second run of 2 of those MOOCs and introducing a third new MOOC called Superhero Entertainment this year. All of them will go on the signature track this year. We have the initiative of reaching out to students before they start their candidature in NUS. These are national servicemen who would have gotten a place in university but would have to serve 2 years of army before they get to the institution. So for the last 6 months of their army stint, we give them a blended learning online course access. Going forward then, these are some of the things that we have been working on, making the curriculum flexible, allowing students to devise their own majors, double majors, and double degrees. We've been thinking about designing more stackable courses, short-term certificates that would be accumulated and built up to a degree. We have been allowing for advanced placement credits. The question now is whether we would allow advanced placement credits for MOOCs. We have been working on the model of DOCC, Distributed Online Collaborative Courses, where different lecturers from different universities can come together to put together a course. So basically the idea here is that it gets more and more responsive, more and more collaborative, and more community-based and flexible. In terms of QA, You always had that proctored exams, even for fully online courses. On our MOOCs, when you go signature track, what it means is that students get much more diligently tracked on every point of their learning development. We always have, even with credit transfer, we have diagnostics at admission or admission tests before we allow for advanced placement credits. Even within the blended design courses within the institution, we make sure that every course must have a face-to-face component to more closely guide students, even as we put them online. And of course, we will never get rid, probably, of the institutional-based assessment and certification. That is a major role in universities where we credentialize what we are offering. I will skip the resistance. I think those are very well known, and I'm very aware that I've gone way beyond my time. So let me just say that we want to keep our focus on student learning outcomes in our blended learning environment, and the strategy is to optimize the engagement as we expand the way we offer our courses to a tech-literate student population. The key word here is really integration. It's not about platform, it's not about what technology you add, it's about the way you design it and integrate it for a full learning experience. I think this slide is very important. Yoon-il wrote, "Considerable benefits already have been achieved in using ICTs to enhance student learning and to extend educational opportunities to those unable to attend conventional university campus-based programs. Care must be taken, however, to preserve what was of value in teaching and learning practices, particularly the intensive dialogue that was possible before the days of mass market circumstances. However, paradoxically, this may be possible. These intensive engagement may be possible through the more sophisticated use of technology that look like they are threatening the one-to-many lecture model." So in other words, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There have been very good things that have been happening to us in our traditional mode. We need to carefully integrate them with the appropriate technology. Lastly, I would like to end with this quote from my president, Tan Cho Chuan, in his university address in 2012, when he devoted the first 5 million to our experimentation. He said, "Regardless of whether a campus tsunami comes or does not, we will place ourselves strategically for the future and make NUS a leading global university centered in Asia." And that remains even more true today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I feel very honored to be here. And I'm from Japan, but I'm not really going to talk about university in Japan because you may think Japan is technologically advanced society, and we may, appear to be doing something really fancy and nice in terms of education with ICT. But in my opinion, most of the university in Japan are still kind of university of yesterday. So I'm kind of projecting more into looking into the future, how we should actually aim at, what we should aim at in terms of moving the university for university of tomorrow. So, and also I like to actually introduce the concept, which I think many of you may have known already, and I think will fundamentally change the way higher education will be in the future. And it's not really just a technology. Of course, it's technology as basic driver, but it's not just technology, but this basic concept of what I'm going to introduce. So the title is "Will the University of Tomorrow be better than the University of Today?" And that's the question I think we have to ask to ourselves. And I will give some material for you to think about that question. So first of all, we have lots of challenges. We face a lot of challenges in terms of the university of today. Our students, our society's needs are getting more diverse, and student population is getting more diverse, and there's a force of globalization. And here we've been talking about technological advancement. It's also another challenge. And also many universities are raising their college tuition cost, and that is actually posing a big challenge. And there has been a big actually talk of a skills gap, which this term actually come from US and the States, but in Japan, we also talk about the skills gap. What is skills gap? Well, the skills gap is the gap between what university or higher education is supposed to produce in terms of the potential employees and employers, the future employers will expect of the graduate of higher education institution. There seems to be a big gap, and the gap. Well, of course, many people would say that higher education is not only for employment. Yes, that's true, but many higher education, many students who are paying high tuition cost are actually expecting to get good salary after their graduation and getting a good job. And if there is such a skills gap, it's widening, and that would be actually the problem for higher education institution to think of. So there is a problem or challenge of skills gap, and I think that all comes into, I think, in my opinion, is that the current inadequate assessment of student learning outcomes. We talk about how we deliver lecture, how we deliver learning materials. We all focus on presentation and delivery of those materials, learning materials, but we don't really talk much about how we assess the student performance, how we actually assess the learning outcomes. And that is actually the really, really important aspect. I think in the future, the educational mission of educational institution will become really how we assess the student performance well. So that skills gap I talked about already. Nowadays, the students go to university and the colleges and they get diplomas and transcript, but they don't really, those diplomas and transcript don't really tell much in terms of what kind of employability, what kind of the skills they have. And we depend on higher education institutions in Japan and in the States and many other countries still focus more on credit hours, time-based education system doesn't really represent students' learning. It's just that how many hours of classroom seating time being spent for student or instructors as well. So academic programs are kind of inflexible. We higher education institutions are becoming dinosaur, and we are so I don't know how can I say, but kind of have the fake stability, the sense of fake stability, that the higher education institutions are so-called last one to actually innovate themselves and become really dinosaur and become inflexible to meet the changing needs of society. And that will be actually are becoming the problem. So what is the function of a university anyway? Well, if you haven't had a chance to watch this wonderful movie called Ivory Tower, made by CNN Film, it's a documentary film, but it talks about the current higher education institutions in effective system. And according to that film, they said that there are three functions which universities should serve. Is first, the knowledge provision creation, which we focus much on. And also, university has a function of providing a student with network of peers. I think this is a good, very valuable function we shouldn't really take light of. So giving the student providing student with network of peers. And also, of course, we at higher education institutions provide credentials and diplomas, and that's really important function of university of today, and probably even university of tomorrow. The main function and the major function of a university will be the credentialing and diploma provision. And also, this is also not really well discussed. Is also learner support. We're talking about those online learning, MOOCs, the MOOCs are mostly online provision of learning materials. Of course, there are some provision of online network of peers and also some interaction, but learner support, in terms of learner support, we've been kind of neglecting. But I think that will become really, really important, because when the university is for those elite people who are very motivated, they don't really need much of the learner support. But those people who are not really so-called the top of the cream, they need lots of learner support. Nowadays there are many abundant materials online. They are free, but without learning support or learner support, those students, most of the learners who cannot really motivate themselves, who don't really know how to learn, need support. So those two things, credentialing and diploma giving and learner support, I think will become a big important function of university of tomorrow. And in the morning, one of the speakers mentioned the Christensen's, the disruptive innovation. And in education field, those are, I think, so-called disruptive innovation. First is open educational resources, which have been around for more than 10 years. But without those open educational resources, we don't really have freely available learning resources or learning materials. But now we have abundant of those resources, especially in English. If it comes to the different languages, maybe the quantity of OERs, open educational resources, may become smaller, especially like in Japanese. We don't have that many open educational resources as you see in English. And MOOCs, many people talk about that, and there will be a big session on MOOCs tomorrow, and personalized learning, and growing focus on learning outcomes, and what I think will become driving force for change in higher education of tomorrow will be, I think, the competency-based education. And the competency-based education is not really totally new thing. It has been around probably as a concept over 20, 30 years already. But with those OER, open educational resources, and MOOCs, and online education, the competency-based education now become really, really possible and attainable. Before that, it was such a daunting task actually to assess any kind of student learning performance. But now with technology, this competency-based education has, I think, become possible, really possible, and be realistic. So what is competency-based education? Well, it's a competency-based, meaning that whatever the credentials, awards will be based on student learning, not the seat time, not time spent in class. But now higher education systems everywhere, even in the States and in Japan and Korea, I'm sure that it's based on credit hour system. And the credit hour system is based on the seat time, so-called contact time, which actually presupposes that there is some instructor being present, or if it's not instructor being present physically, but there is some kind of contact hours which will be equivalent of contact hour of face-to-face instruction. So that's actually the higher education institution has been worked on for many, many years since its inception. And but based on competency-based education, the time is not the variable. Oh, I'm sorry. Time is not constant. So it's not like, you have to have 120 credit hours, then you can get bachelor's degree. It's the time-based system. But competency-based system, regardless of, it doesn't really matter how long a student or learner spent in acquiring a certain defined competence, but it's just that the competency, if it's well-defined, first of all, it has to be well-defined, otherwise it will create lots of problems. But well-defined competence and the well actually, how can I say, well-performed assessment will actually move students at their own pace so that those students who can actually acquire skills and knowledge and attitude quickly in terms of competence, they can move faster or faster in certain kind of competencies, but not others, and so forth. So it's not really limiting student to certain amount of time, but assess the student what they actually already acquired in terms of knowledge and skills and attitude. And so which is good for learners because they are not really confined to certain time in terms of, which means they may be able to save tuition cost in doing so. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is that employers will know what this particular student acquired in terms of their skills and knowledge and attitude in terms of competence, and so that they are more the student ability is more become transparent. So provide a clear signal of what graduates know and are able to do, which is, I think, a good thing for even employers. So it's a continuation of what is competency-based education. It's based on explicit learning outcomes and flexible time frame to master or acquire those competencies, defined competencies, and it can go through variety of learning activities, and performance testing or performance assessment will be a criterion reference testing, and so assessment will be done based on performance, and educational programs will become more adaptable to student need and society's need. And so what is competency? The competency is a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitude. Oftentimes it's knowledge and skills, but I think it also involves attitude and some disposition too. And as some of the speakers also mentioned, that it's not just acquisition of skills and knowledge. It's not like testing to see if this person knows this or not, but also how they can actually apply those acquired skills and knowledge into actual problem solving. And this I got from some Edico's review online. And this actually explain how those different kind of education, so-called educational concept being placed in terms of modality and in terms of course design. And it's interesting to have that the war between instructional design team, including faculty and the other, and there is outsourcing partnerships. And we see now more and more those outsourcing partnerships in offering MOOCs and also those competency-based programs as well.